Could the Sabres trade for Carter Hart? We'll tackle that, get into Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Eric Comrie's status in the organization. Coming up on Locked On Sabres.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we are free and available on YouTube as well. We got some fun topics to get to today on the show. Goalies. Lots and lots of goalies beginning to end here on Locked On Sabres, at Locked On Sabres on Twitter, at Sneaky Joe Sports to follow me. Check out the podcast account on YouTube where you can check out the comment section. We always have good discussion there. We keep it clean here on the Locked On Sabres comment section on YouTube. Like and subscribe us there. And lots of good stuff coming your way. Joe DiBiase and all goalies all the time on today's show. Carter Hart. I got a reason for talking Carter Hart, not making it up out of thin air. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Eric Comrie in our exit interview. And we'll talk Devin Levi on our next show more thoroughly. But today, Luukkonen and Comrie, as we are almost done, just kind of going player by player here through the roster, you know, what their season was like and what is upcoming for them, contract status and whatnot. Luukkonen, very interesting. Can't wait to get to thought about him in the second segment that I've been pushing the narrative on since the season ended, maybe even before that. But before we do that, and before we even get to Carter Hart as a trade idea for the Sabres, very quickly, Jack Eichel destroyed by Matthew Tkachuk in the Stanley Cup playoffs. One of the biggest hits you'll ever see in today's game. And I have not seen Eichel take hits that big. Not with Vegas, not with the Sabres, not in college, not anywhere. World Cup of Hockey, I don't think I've ever seen Eichel take a big hit. He doesn't get hit. He's so elusive in open ice that he doesn't allow himself to get hit at open ice. But he does get hit along the board sometimes. But this was just head down. Matthew Tkachuk, of all people, coming through the neutral zone. He just come off the bench, so Eichel didn't see him coming. And to Eichel's, his fault, I guess. He falls into Tkachuk. He doesn't see him coming. He kind of falls into him. And it's as clean a hit as you'll ever see. There's nothing wrong with it. Nobody is calling it dirty. It's not dirty. Tkachuk, man, just ran through Eichel. I couldn't believe he got a penalty on the play. Eichel, though, with, honestly, a Paul Kariya light moment where he looks like the guy might be out for the series, right? He's grabbing his arm. He's yelling off the ice. And he's definitely dealing with something. Even post-game, he wouldn't really get into it, but you could tell that he was laboring to some degree. But he returns for the third period and gives a really nice assist out in front of the net. Another multi-point game for him. And if you're hate watching Jack Eichel, this is not the playoffs for you because the dude has been dynamite beginning to end. And, that was an iconic, maybe not iconic's a little strong, memorable to say the least, effort by Jack Eichel in that one. Okay, so the reason why I want to talk Carter Hart today, there's news in the league. I've wondered if there'd be big trades before the Stanley Cup final was over. Well, we've already got one. A 3-team trade between Philadelphia, LA, and Columbus, which involves Ivan Provorov, star defenseman of the Flyers, going through LA with some salary retention and then to Columbus. So Provorov to the Blue Jackets. Cal Peterson, former Sabre prospect, goaltender, who's really fallen off in the last couple of years. He goes from LA to Philadelphia. Now, going from LA to Philadelphia, it's really not a guy that matters a whole lot to the NHL club. But what is on display here is Philadelphia is showing a desire to clear out cap space. Danny Briere wants to maybe clear the decks a little bit, start over, start his own thing, maybe rebuild a little bit here. The Flyers never like to rebuild, but maybe Briere got that in his mindset. So they have Peterson, and Peterson has a big contract, 2 more years, $5 million. Now, the reason why you might think they're going into a rebuild is they going to want push some salary out to take the Cal Peterson contract on, or are they going to want $10 million invested in goalie? Not everybody thinks that they want to do that. Darren Dreger of TSN says that the Flyers are listening on Carter Hart, who has got one more year on his contract at 24 years old, $3.979 million. And there are some rumors, there is speculation tying Philadelphia to Buffalo and involving Carter Hart. They're not the only ones. I've seen Montreal writers, post about the potential for the Canadiens to get Hart. The Red Wings, same thing. But the Sabres are a team that have been connected to goaltenders as recently as this morning. We saw Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period write about the Sabres being interested in upgrading net and, hey, maybe John Gibson for them. So they're being connected to these goalie ideas. Hart might be the most realistic, among Hellebuck and among Gibson. I think Hart might be the guy that makes the most sense, or not that makes the most sense, because I like the Hellebuck idea, but the guy that is most realistic to actually happen. I might want to even lean close to 50-50 that they actually pull this trade off. They have the desire to do it. They have the assets to do it. Philly, I think, is going to have the desire to do it. And there is a trade that makes a little bit of sense between the two teams. I'll get to that in a second, though. What about Hart for the Sabres? Is this a good idea? Well, as I just ran through it, 24 years old. Okay, so age, check. Check that box. Contract, half check in pencil. One more year, $3.979 million. Fine, don't care about the cap hit. They're not going to be near the cap this year anyway still. But restricted free agent at the end of the deal. There is some risk with this. Now, he's not a player so good that I'd be that worried about him making it ugly, pushing his way out. I think you'd manage to get a deal done if you wanted to. But he could tell the Sabres after one season, I'm only signing a one-year contract and then I'm walking and becoming a UFA. One of those guys. I'm not predicting that would happen, though, if they were to trade for Carter Hart. So I could look past that. And I wonder if the Sabres could too. The numbers. This guy's been up and down throughout his career. He's had a couple of, honestly, elite seasons, and he's had a couple of bad seasons. So very up and down. Honestly, kind of reminds me of Sergei Bobrovsky's beginning to his career. A young phenom goalie in Philadelphia that, like, the savior, right? The Flyers have never had goaltending. Bobrovsky's going to be the savior. And after a couple of years as a youngster, they decide to trade him away. And then he starts flourishing with Columbus. Well, Hart, he was built up the same way. I mean, there was a time where he was the best young goalie, one of the best young goalies in the world. I feel like I say that with everybody. So one of the best young goalies in the world for sure. And if you look at his goals saved above expected by season, where he ranks, and generally this is out of about 70 to 75 goaltenders, Carter Hart's ranked, working our way back from last year and before, 21st last season, 45th, 64th, 11th, and 31st. So as you can see there, he's got two really strong years, another good year, and then one bad year and one horrific year. That 2020-21 year, Hart was he was third from the bottom in goals saved above expected. Only 67 goalies qualified that year. So I like the player enough. He's not a stud. He's not as reliable as other ideas, but there is still potential with this guy. And I think if you paired him with Devin Levi, this isn't Fleury, who you signed for 1 year to help groom Levi. This isn't even, this isn't Jonathan Quick for sure. It's not Frederick Anderson. It's not Semyon Varlamov. This is a guy that I'd imagine you'd want to pair with Levi for 5+ years. You'd hope at least that you would get that out of him, given that he's only 24 years old. What would it cost? I heard Chopin the Bulldog on my drive on Tuesday. Mike just wondered out loud, is Luukkonen enough? Is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen on his own enough to get a trade done? My instinct goes, no way. Hart's more valuable than Luukkonen. I think that's true. Then I thought about it. What does Philly want out of this? Philly wants to clear cap space. Check. Philly wants to start over a little bit. Okay. So what do you want to do when you start over? You want youth. You want potential. And Luukkonen still gives you that. He's not yet there, but he's a guy you could sell your team and your fans on we could develop this guy a couple years into a number one goalie in the NHL. That is still a defensible stance to have. So I think it'd probably be a little bit more, but Luukkonen in a second, Luukkonen in a third, I don't think this would cost you a ton. I don't think Hart would cost the Sabres a first-round pick. I don't think he'd cost them Yuri Kulik. I don't think he'd cost them Matthew Savoy or Peyton Krebs. Really, any of those guys, any of their first-round pick guys. I think Luukkonen and a throw-in. I think that's what you're talking about, which is why I can very easily see this trade happening. So it's a little bit of an exciting idea to me because I think this is better than I thought going after the season ended the Sabres would end up doing in goal. They still have to do it. But I think Hart is a real idea. Hart's a guy you could really think about being your number one for years. And, Devin Levi can kind of just show up whenever. Not fully. He's not Hellebuck for that. But I like this idea a lot for Carter Hart. Definitely with some risk, but I think a goalie that can really be a long-term solution as a partner for Devin Levi. So Carter Hart, we'll see what ends up happening, and we'll keep it locked here on Locked On Sabres for rumors and whatnot. Before we take a timeout and we get back into our exit interview series, we just got the goalies to go. Luukkonen and Comrie are next up. Before we get into them, we are brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs makes you look good. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dogs shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs use anti-stink, sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day. The shorts, of course, are incredible. I love the golf joggers as well. And they're cool enough so that, you might have a day where it's a little chilly, but it's in the low 60s and maybe a little breezy, but this is going to keep you warm if it is breezy, but they're cool enough so that when you're in the sun, you're not going to be sweating or anything like that. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL, enter the promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise. Check them out, birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. Welcome back to the Locked On Sabres podcast with Joe DiBiase. I am distracted because I just got a text from my fiance getting married on Friday. By the way, quick show update for those of you. So I will be away. I'll be in Europe for my honeymoon. I know, not the best timing for the show. I apologize for that. But I will be recording some episodes beforehand, so you'll have some content over the next couple of weeks from this coming Monday until the next Friday. So that's a 2-week stretch there before the draft, before free agency. So I will be back in time for both the draft and free agency, and then some, a little bit. But if there's any breaking news, if they trade for Carter Hart next Thursday, then we will have it covered here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Just won't be for me because, maybe I could find a way to record a video. Those internet packages, though, on those cruise ships doing a Mediterranean cruise, they're fine. I'd have to test it first. I don't know how capable it'll be to record any sort of video or anything like that, or even audio for that matter. So anyways, just a heads up on that front, but I'm going to be going through a new series, breaking down different free agent options for the Sabres that are coming your way on July 1st. So that you can look forward to that for the next couple of weeks as we talk more and more off season. Anyways, the text was, by the way, if you're wondering, I guess you just bought me expensive earrings. I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that means. That could mean my card was hijacked. I don't know. Anyways, back to it here on the Locked On Sabres podcast at Sneaky Joe Sports on Twitter. Exit interview series. We only got the goalies to go. So today I figured since we're spending some time at Carter Hart, we go to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and then Eric Comrie, save Devin Levi. I want to do a full show or near a full show on Devin Levi. Luukkonen is the guy we'll start with. He's a very interesting player. And I think he's a guy with value, and he's a guy that I've talked about extensively on the show as the Sabres need to move on from. But there's reason for that. Before we get into the future with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, what I do want to break down is how we've arrived at this point. Luukkonen developed in Rochester for a couple of years and did not really have all that much success. In fact, if you look at Luukkonen's stats in the AHL, they're actually worse than they are in the NHL. Luukkonen's numbers with the Rochester Americans, in 14 games played in 2020-21, a 888 save percentage. The year before that, sorry, I skipped one. In 10 games, an 874 save percentage. In 35 games played, an exactly 900 save percentage. And then in 23, he only played 9 games for the Amerks this past year, an 898 save percentage. So that's like an 887 save percentage in the AHL. He's at an 898 in the NHL. You really have to go all the way back to his 2018 campaign in the OHL to get to your last season where Luukkonen was an above-average goaltender, no matter the level he played at. Now, to be fair, he had some hip surgeries, and that, I think, really delayed his progress a little bit, stalled his development, which is why I don't think it's right to write him off. But we're in a tricky spot. How do we get to a tricky spot? Well, Luukkonen had his chance. If you ask me, he had his chance. And we talked about this before last season. Hey, Luukkonen, if you want to be this team's number one goaltender, or hell, one of 2 goalies on this team, you got to prove it now because you got here first. Devin Levi is playing in college one more year. And Eric Portillo, at the time we thought he could be a part of the future, he's got another college season upcoming. You're here. You've got Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie in your way. You should be able to overtake one of them and prove you're an NHL goaltender. And if you do that, then you're a Sabre, right? But what happened? He did get up with the Sabres. It wasn't by his play. He got to the Sabres because Eric Comrie got injured. And Craig Anderson is a 40-plus-year-old goaltender. Circumstance is how Luukkonen played for the Sabres for the majority of this past season. An 892 save percentage. When you look at his goals saved above expected for the season, Luukkonen ranked 52nd out of 79, always per 60 minutes, by the way, on that number. He was in the negative on goals saved above expected per 60 minutes. Around the numbers of Jordan Binnington and Martin Jones and Peter Mrazek. These are not good goaltenders in the NHL. They're hardly NHL goaltenders anymore. And that's really the point for me on Luukkonen. He did not prove last season that he's an NHL goaltender. And I don't think at this point we have nearly enough, let alone any evidence at all, that Luukkonen is an NHL goaltender. And guess what? The Sabres are going into a win-now season. They have to make the playoffs next year. They are a playoffs or bust type of season. And you've already penciled in one goalie that has only played 7 games in the NHL. You've got a rookie. He's unproven, but you have more reason to believe he's an NHL goaltender than Luukkonen. So guess what? He gets to be the unproven guy. And can you stomach having 2 unproven guys? To me, the answer to that question is no. So Levi way outranks Luukkonen. And who's the right partner for Levi? It's not another unproven guy. It's not another guy that you're hoping takes a step forward, gets some development. Luukkonen just doesn't fit in this current Sabre goalie picture. And by the way, if you want it, it's not like Levi's the only guy in the system. I don't know, really. We talked a little bit about his development with Heidi Kalakash a couple weeks ago. But Topias Leinonen, the Sabres made him the top goalie selected in the 2022 NHL draft in round number 2. He went to Finland. His numbers didn't look great, but, Heidi thought he had a decent season development-wise. So, I don't know. That's not a nobody. They drafted the number 1 goalie in the last draft. So, he's coming at some point, probably, 2-3 years at the least. But there's another guy in the pipeline. Levi's here now. Where does Luukkonen fit in? He doesn't. And the worst part is he can't go to Rochester. If he could, I'd be fine with it. You know what? Send him to Rochester, see if he develops this year, and maybe he could be Levi's partner in 2024-25. But he can't. He has to be waived to be sent down. And because of the potential still that is there, he's young enough, big size, big athleticism, he'd get claimed. I think he'd get claimed. So you got to move him. You got to trade him. You got to trade him. And I think there's enough value there because, some of this will sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. And I guess I am a little bit. I don't think there's evidence that he's an NHL goaltender. But the goal is, can I convince another NHL GM that he could be an NHL guy? He can be. And maybe there is. He was rookie of the month in the month of January, which is funny because December was actually his best month. December for the Sabres, he started 14 games. He went 8-5-1. He had a .918 save percentage. January, the month he won rookie of the month, he had 12 starts, 6 wins, 4 losses, 2 overtime losses, and a .901 save percentage. And then from there on out, near the bottom of the league. One of the worst goalies in hockey from February on. And November, he only played a couple games, but he was really bad in November. So you got one good month in December, a pretty good month in January, and a bunch of bad months surrounding it. So what can I convince a GM of? Hey, he flashed a little bit. Rookie of the month, right? He flashed, and we just can't stomach it. We need a proven guy. Levi outranked him, but you, Mr. Blank, whoever GM you are, Philly, you don't have a number one for the future. Cal Peterson's not going to be it. And let's be real, you're not going to be good this year anyway. Flyers, just put Luukkonen in, play him a bunch of games and get him ready for the next year so that 2-3 years down the road, he could be your number one guy. That's the way you should be looking at Luukkonen. I've thought about Vancouver for this. Vancouver's not going to be good. Let me see if I can get Demko, throw them Luukkonen, could be their goalie of the future. Winnipeg, I sell Winnipeg on, hey, if you're trading Hellebuck, this could be your guy in 2-3 years. That's to me the sales pitch to get rid of Luukkonen. And I do like the idea of packaging him with a mid-round pick or even a second or a third-round pick to get Carter Hart. I think that's a fair trade. I think the Flyers would have enough interest in that. I think Luukkonen is a guy with value. I think he could have a future as a good NHL goalie, even a number one NHL goalie. I just don't think the puzzle piece fits for what the Sabres need right now. He's been usurped by Devin Levi. He had his chance, and, it's time to cash in on that value and ship him off. And all of that, by the way, because I do not want to see, and I don't think the Sabres want to see 3 goalies again. You might be thinking, why don't I do Levi, Luukkonen, and a guy? No more 3 goalies. 2 guys, that's it. Run with it. There's a reason every team in the NHL does it. Practice even is a reason for it. Time out here. What about Eric Comrie? I've not even mentioned him. There's a reason for that. I'll explain when we come back. Eric Comrie, exit interview. Oh, by the way, a grade for Luukkonen. I forgot about a grade for Luukkonen. I would give him a C-. Again, he had 1 good month, 1 average month, and a bunch of bad months. He did just enough, I think, to hold his value to be traded. C- is what I'm going to go with for Luukkonen. Time out here. Eric Comrie when we come back on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We're brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage on the site and look for the green check to know the part will fit. Or your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Joe DiBiase here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Final segment. Let's be a short and sweet one. Maybe not sweet. Bittersweet. Eric Comrie, exit interview for Eric Comrie, who signed a 2-year deal with the Buffalo Sabres last offseason and really was penciled in as the number 1 goaltender going into the year. And boy, is that changed from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So Comrie signed a 2-year deal at 26 years old, $1.8 million cap hit, which means he's under contract for the upcoming season at $1.8 million. What happened to Eric Comrie? Now, again, going into the year, Luukkonen was in Rochester. Craig Anderson was 41. And Comrie was coming off a season where, yes, he only played 19 games for Winnipeg, but led the NHL in certain metrics. Was it save percentage? No, it was goal saved above expected. He was number 1 in the league behind Connor Hellebuck. Then he got to Buffalo, and it did not go well. He, in fact, I mean, was one of the worst goalies in hockey. I mentioned he was number one last year in goals saved above expected for Winnipeg, or 2 years ago. What was he for the Sabres this past season? 69th out of 79. One of the 10 worst goalies in the National Hockey League, well in the negative, an 886 save percentage. He somehow managed to pull off a 9-9 in one season. Well, actually, I think I know why that happened, because the Sabres scored 8 goals every time he was in the net. And that was happening late in the year, remember. He returned from injury. He was winning a bunch of games, and I was sitting here saying, guys, he's not playing well. He's winning games 6-5. That's not playing well. You don't get credit for that win. I mean, you do by your record, but you shouldn't get to keep playing because of it. To me, Comrie, after that production, there's no argument for him to be on the team next season. No argument. And I don't think he will. I think the Sabres understand that. He has no trade value, so it's not like Luukkonen in that way. But there's no argument for him to be on the team. If he wants to be the Sabres' number 3 goaltender, by all means. For instance, Malcolm Subban, who just had this great run for the Amherst in the playoffs, he's a free agent. And if the Sabres want to make Eric Comrie the number 1 goalie in Rochester, I think that's a good outcome. He could be your number 3. I'm good with that. I'm good with Comrie being the Sabres' number 3 goaltender, but not your number 2, not your 1B, certainly not your 1A. The third guy that plays with the Rochester Americans, and he only gets called up if there's an injury. Now, can he go to Rochester? I mean, he can. He's got to pass through waivers. My guess is he would not get claimed. And to me, even though the Sabres won't be a cap team, you might want a couple $1 million to do something with. And by the current salary cap rules, Comrie's $1.8 million cap hit, if the Sabres sent him down to Rochester and he cleared waivers, they would save $1.125 million of the 1.8 on their cap. So, it's basically, do you want Eric Comrie on your team for $1.8 million? Or do you not want him on your team for $600,000, roughly? And come on, the latter. Every day, all day, every day. So that, or you know what? Maybe he's a throw-in piece. Maybe some other team wants him as their backup. Maybe Winnipeg wants him back. Although they seem to be moving on from Hellebuck, so I don't think they'd want that. But someone with a bona fide number 1 that thinks, his advanced numbers were good 2 years ago, I can get something out of him. Maybe he's got potential as a throw-in, a future considerations type trade, just for somebody that wants to take the salary. But to me, the best outcome for Comrie is he's the Amherst starting goalie in the next season, and he's the Sabres' 3rd goalie. But there is no argument whatsoever that he should be on the team. And by the way, he's got me spooked. Him plus Carter Hutton. These are guys that were backups, clear-cut number 2s on really good teams that limited chances, that had super high, super incredible numbers. Hutton led the NHL in save percentage his final year with the St. Louis Blues, like 5, 6, 7 years ago. And Comrie, 2 years ago, had some of the best numbers in the league with Winnipeg. And what the Sabres do? Well, an amazing number 2, league-high numbers. Let me sign that guy and see if he could do the same thing playing 50 games. And what happened both times? Not nearly capable. Not even close. And I've got that mindset when people are asking me about Adin Hill. We got the finals going on right now, and Adin Hill is playing out of his mind for the Vegas Golden Knights. He, right now, I believe, is the Calder or the Conn Smythe favorite. Yes, I'm saying right now, Eric Comrie has me not wanting the Conn Smythe favorite right now, because that's what Adin Hill is. Adin Hill, he played more games than Comrie, not more than Hutton. Adin Hill has never played or started more than 25 games in a season. He has been appearing in the NHL for 6 seasons. He's look at his games started by season: 4, 11, 9, 17, 22, 25. The guy's never been even a 1B, let alone a 1. And what is he going to be asked to do with Devin Levi? Be a 1B. He's been a 2 on great teams. Well, excuse me. He's not been on great teams. So actually, on that front, that's a little different. He's on a great team now, is what I should say. He's on a great team now. He had good results in 25 starts for the Golden Knights, and now he's playing amazing in the playoffs. I want no part of another guy where I got to wonder, well, if I bump his games up from 20 to 40, then he could be this good. No, done. Didn't work for Comrie. Didn't work for Hutton. I don't want to see it with Adin Hill. Yeah, Comrie was so bad last year that he's even got me spooked off of other goalie ideas like Adin Hill. But again, Amherst, no Sabres. if you're asking me. Hopefully, I've got a Carter Hart trade to talk to you about on our next show. If not, then we'll spend the majority of it talking about Devin Levi and a little bit more on the Stanley Cup final. We're going to be between games here. But anyways, Devin Levi, what's right for him? How many games? The right partner? Can he be the number one Calder Trophy odds for him? A lot to get to on the Sabres' future in goal. Devin Levi, next up for you everydayers here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Check us out on YouTube, and be sure to hit us up, your opinions on anything on the show, at Sneaky Joe Sports, at Locked On Sabres, or on our comment section on YouTube. We'll talk to you next time here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.